live in an age of cars that are power obsessed. These days you can buy yourself a hotted up Ford Fiesta with 200 horsepower. That was 4-litre Jag territory back in the late 80s, and if you've got the means, you can buy a family saloon car with over 500 horsepower. Well, today we're driving a car that revels in making the most out of having the least, and not just with its engine, in every aspect of the way it's designed and engineered. Welcome everyone to the famous, the wonderful, the quirky and rather brilliant Citroën 2CV. One of the elder statesmen of the classic car scene, this one. Launched in 1948, the 2CV was in production for over 40 years. It's the second longest lived single production car after the VW Beetle. Over its 42-year life, the 2CV wasn't just built in various forms, including a four-door, a panel van, and a pickup. There was the Mahari Jeep, which was, I guess, France's version of the Mini Moke, and the gorgeous little Bijou Coupe. But even in just this form, the normal 2CV, guys, they made over 3.8 million of these things. Factor in all its variants and derivatives, and you're talking about 9.2 million of these cars have been produced. We all know the base story behind the 2CV. It was actually developed in the mid-1930s, but producing the car had to be put on hold after a certain Second World War got in the way. After the car had finally been given the OK for production after World War II though, there had to be some small changes made to the design. For a start, they weren't going to be making it out of aluminium like they planned to, because the prices of aluminium, as a result of all the demands for the war effort, had gone up 40% in 4 years. The general ethos of the 2CV did make it into production though. A bare bones car that was simply produced and simple to own and maintain. From the very beginning and all the way through, it was powered by a durable, air-cooled, flat twin engine. The earliest examples of which were 375 cc's in capacity and whopping out a mighty 9 horsepower. The ethos behind the 2CV was a car that was as simple and as cheap to produce as possible, because that meant it'd be cheaper to sell, which made it better for mobilising the poor French masses. And you can see that in so many elements of the way that the car's designed. Take for instance the windows. Look closely and you'll notice that every piece of glass on a 2CV is flat, because that's cheaper and easier to produce than a curved piece of glass like you get, for example, on a VW Beetle. A full-length rollback sunroof might sound like a decadent luxury item, but in fact that was your only option for the roof on a 2CV. The reason? Well, a normal metal roof is one massive piece of steel that was obviously going to be far more expensive than this rollback canvas affair. Cheaper to produce and therefore cheaper to sell. And the theme of simplicity continues inside as well. Quality. However, despite being such a basic and cheap car, the 2CV does offer you air conditioning. You want to see it? Yep, that's right. A flap in the front of the car that opens to let fresh air in. Mercedes, eat your heart out. Despite that simplicity though, there is one aspect to the 2CV that's almost over-engineered by comparison. This car has actually got 4 gears and has had it right the way back to 1948. The engineering department added it as a claimed overdrive, but Citroën Vice President Pierre Boulanger said that was unnecessary. It shouldn't have been there, it was overcomplicating it. But the reality is, it does make the 2CV slightly more capable of sustained high speed than it otherwise would have been if it had only 3 gears. You might also notice that the gear lever isn't on the floor, and it's not even a traditional column-mounted shift that you would have got in cars of this period. In fact, it's this rod that comes out of the dashboard and has a rather unconventional shift pattern. First is down to the left and pull towards you. Second is to then push forward, that's neutral, and then that's second. Third gear, just pull straight back towards you. And then fourth gear is back away from you into neutral, twist up clockwise, and then slot it in. It sounds complicated when you first see it, but within 5 minutes of use, it becomes natural, as you're about to see. And if Boulanger didn't like the fact the 2CV had a 4th gear and thought that was a bit decadent, then he really won't like what happened to the engine over time, because it didn't stay that same size. This is the biggest engine you got in a 2CV, a 602cc parallel twin making a massive 29 horsepower. You want to feel the thunder? There isn't really any thunder. But that's not the point of the 2CV. As we said before, this car plied its trade on making the most out of having the least. And the best way it did that, for driving it at least, is the suspension. In layman's terms, it's two big springs in a can that are connecting the front and rear wheels on both sides together, with then a big spring underneath it. And the net result is a car that not only rides fantastically well over these rather bumpy roads we're on right now, but has some comedy handling characteristics, shall we say. We've all seen pictures of 2CVs putting massive amounts of roll-on going around the corner. But don't go thinking you have to be going fast to do it. It's more to do with how aggressively you drive it. Just going in a straight line now, if I start to give it a handful of wheel now and then, yeah, there's a bit of wobble going on. But once you are used to it, it's hilarious fun, because it means you're pretty much on the limit of the car's grip, which is where most of the fun is, remember, at sensible speeds. And once you've got the hang of that slightly unusual gear change, you can take some liberties with it. It's a riot. And yet, despite the fact it rolls around like a madman and it's always on the edge of grip of its tyres, it's relaxing. I'm comfortable, I'm laid back. I'm easily driving it with one hand and talking to you while I'm doing it. In that French way, it's uber relaxing and it chills you out. He wasn't very chilled there, was he? But what if you fancy owning one and getting yourself into your own little tin snail that'll put itself on its door handles at 25? Let's have a quick word with Jack, who's not only the contributor to several magazines of ours and one of the hosts of our brand new On Your Marks podcast, but owns this rather lovely 2CV6.
I've owned my 2CV since October 2010, so that's just over 10 years now really. At the time I was running a Land Rover as my only transport, and it was the time that diesel was getting over 120p a litre for the first time. So I began thinking, what's like a Land Rover but economical? And when you think about it, that's basically what a 2CV is. It also helped that I'd had some encounters with 2CVs as a kid, and I'd fond memories of the rollback roof and the weird gear change and things like that, and I liked old Citroëns in general. It's been one of the most reliable cars I've ever owned. There's only one time when it properly let me down and conked out at the side of the road when I needed to be somewhere, and that was only a bad ignition condenser. When I first got it, I used it daily in all weathers. I've moved house with it a couple of times. I've done long motorway trips of a few hundred miles at a time in it. There are 3 or 4 big parts suppliers in the UK, plus a couple more in Europe, and they all have online stores, so you just fill up a basket and you can get literally everything, certainly for a standard late 2CV6 like this one. Definitely think that anyone who's into cars or into driving should at least get behind the wheel of a 2CV once, just for that experience that you can't get from anything else. Hopefully dispel the myth that they're just useless roly-poly hippie cars that get overtaken by their own shadow.
And as I click on this gloriously mechanical indicator, I'm reflecting on the 2CV a little bit. As I said, we live in an age of automotive excess, where cars not only can't get enough power, it seems, but they can't get enough technology and extra complications and luxuries. But when you drive a Citroën 2CV, you realise just how little car you actually need. There is no car that has so little, but offers so much. Colin Chapman is famous for saying, simplify and add lightness. And if you look at it that way, the 2CV is a working class Lotus. Yeah, really.